Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. This is Andrew. I'm going to bring us our topic today, and we are all clearly in the room pretty big fans of Tolkien and his world, because we obviously play the GW Middle-earth battle strategy game. So we just thought it would be fun to kind of sit down and talk about the Rings of Power. So I'm going to kind of open this up a little bit with just a few things. First off, what seems to have kind of kickstarted all this was when Amazon bought the TV rights for the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. They bought it for $250 million, is based on what I've found. I could be wrong. I'm not exactly some big researcher. I work for a living. The first season for the Rings of Power is reported to be costed Amazon $465 million. So to give you guys an idea, Avengers Ultron, $365 million went into developing that movie. So big blockbuster movie, made millions and millions of dollars. Lord of the Rings TV series is costing $100 million more. So obviously, I think all of us would agree that just because you throw a bunch of money on something doesn't make it great, right?
I don't know if you're a politician, it does.
Who's in the room?
Who cares who's in the room? No, I'm just kidding. So right now, unfortunately, we don't have Mikey with us. We've got John.
Hi, I'm over here. Directional sound. We're in the game room tonight.
Salva.
Hi, guys.
And we've got Dylan joining us today as well. Mikey is going to join us. He's going to be a little late. He's got, again, he's poor guy's been dealing with a lot of stuff. We've been trying to help him out as best we can. So good thoughts, good vibes, good whatever. Send him his way. So Salva, when you hear about these numbers, like Amazon's clearly investing a lot of money into this project. What are just your initial thoughts and feelings on that?
Well, first, I gotta say that I read the Silmarillion and most of the books written by Tolkien. So I have a strong bias. Definitely, I'm happy when I see people investing money and energy into translating for the masses these stories. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, honestly, because The Lord of the Rings has been I would say, probably most iconic TV series of the 2000, of the millennium so far.
Yeah.
I can say this with confidence, despite many other big names, such as Harry Potter, for example, or Narnia. But Lord of the Rings, the production, the team, everything that was created, it's something that, I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't know if you guys have watched some of the making of, hours and hours.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I cannot say any other movie, despite beloved ones like, Willow or The Dark Crystal, having put so much energy, not just money, but the level of care and dedication. Now, matching the same level of dedication, that is something that money alone cannot buy. So,
okay,
I'm good, but I agree with you. Money alone is not an indicator of success.
Yeah. John, do you have anything do you have much to add to that?
No, I mean, that was about as eloquently as you could put that.
Right.
I think, yeah, it's great that you got such a big budget backing something like this, but like he said, I mean, the right people with $50 million can make something better than the wrong people with $400 million.
Right.
As we know with our beloved models. So that's all I have to say.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. And Dylan, I mean, is there much else?
There's not much else to say. Salva hit the nail on the head when he said money can't buy greatness, essentially.
So I got to ask, and this is going to sound off topic at first, but then you'll see how I'll bring it around. Did you guys ever watch the Jurassic Park Lost Kingdom? Well, I guess it would be Jurassic World.
Oh, the new one?
Yeah.
I watched the first one.
I've watched it.
So not the first new one, the second new one.
Yes, I did watch it.
Okay, so Dylan's watched it.
Sal,
have you had a chance?
I'm not sure if one of the two. It's the guy that did the Guardian of the Galaxies, right?
Yeah.
No.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Then I have not.
I know what you're talking about, the raptor scene.
So no, that's the first one.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's the
okay.
first
No,
one.
Yeah,
we
that's
haven't
the
watched
first
the
one.
second then.
Okay. So the reason I ask is because the director they got for the first 2 episodes is the guy who directed Lost Kingdoms. Now, I will say I really did enjoy the movie overall. I did have some complaints with it, but I will say he did a really good job hooking me within like the first hour. I was just a little slightly disappointed with how it went because it went into this whole, in the first the Jurassic World movie. Because so we've got Jurassic Park, the 3 Jurassic Park movies, then we move into Jurassic World. So Jurassic World, great, was fine. I enjoyed it. It was a giant monster flick as far as I was concerned. The second one, they tried to add this whole air of mystery and everything by having
more to make it a horror movie than
a little bit.
Yeah.
Like there were some horror movie themes in it. But then just like having the Super Raptor 2.0.
and then the whole god awful twist at the end with the
it took like kind of a heavy nosedive at the end. So at least in my opinion, again, hey, it's the internet. Everybody's got an opinion, just like buttholes. I said it. Anyway, so I guess to me, like I don't know. I'm looking forward to at least checking out the first couple episodes. That's my opinion on it. Since Salva and John, you guys haven't really seen that, I guess it's a little hard to ask your all's opinion on it. But Dylan, since you've seen it, like
I will say this from the 1-minute trailer from the Lord of the Rings TV show, the set pieces look amazing. Which, with the director being that, I'm hoping that the set pieces at least continue to look amazing throughout. But the thing that I'm concerned about is set pieces aren't everything that the director has to worry about.
Right. So now we're going to move into some heavier things. How would you guys think that Tolkien might actually feel about what we've? So this is so just to inform our listeners here. I told everybody before we started recording, like we all have different opinions about this project and how we feel about it, to all of us to varying different degrees. So this is a safe space. So when I ask you guys these questions, please don't feel like you need to. I mean, let's be a little respectful, but maybe not just hold back too much. So I'm gonna start with Salva.
Yes.
So I'm gonna. So how do you think he would feel about this whole project?
Well, it's hard to say before having watched this series, but I gotta say this. Based on what I've seen so far, I would say that he would be definitely flattered by the interest in his work and by the amount of time and money that's been put. But knowing the little I know about Tolkien, he would care the most about, in the end, what kind of message has been put forth. And my biggest concern is this. It is a matter of perspective and focus. Do we put the focus more on what we, in our time, okay, in 2020 something, we want to say to the world by using Tolkien as a sort of a frame, or we're putting the work of Tolkien and we translate that work into our own time? These are 2 different approaches. And so when people may say, oh, but we're going to get into that later on, but like certain different identities, actors, genders, and I would say that doesn't scare me at all per se. But what concerns me is what has been transparent so far. It's more of I'm afraid that we're just using Tolkien as an excuse to sell a message that is a product of our time.
Okay.
That is, so in that sense, he definitely would not be happy.
Okay.
I think.
John.
I know he wouldn't be happy. And the reason for it is because the Tolkien estate wasn't happy about the the movie trilogy that we got in the early 2000s. They hated it. Christopher Tolkien didn't want it to happen, but he relented because of the just honestly absurd amount of care that went into it. And even then, he wasn't totally happy with the product. So if Christopher is any representation of his dad, then he would hate it. However, with that said, just because the Tolkien estate, Tolkien himself wouldn't like it, doesn't mean it's not good. Because I think those movies I just spoke about are cinematic masterpieces. Probably may never be topped in some respects.
I think, yeah, and I think everyone in the room would definitely agree with that.
But with that said, I think Tolkien was a little bit of a traditionalist too. So, and you can tell by, some of the themes that come up in his work, even for his time, they were kind of anti-progressive, so to speak. Just even like the use of technology in his work, for instance. Like, he just wasn't a very progressive guy. He was more interested in old things, old languages, old literature, old equipment, old customs. So, with that said, I don't think he would be that flattered by all the new flashy movie industry stuff. I really don't think. I think he would rather it be a spaghetti western type thing than
right, or like a stage play.
And exactly.
Yeah.
All that said, I don't think assuming they stick pretty close to the material,
right,
and don't bastardize it too much, I think it would be respectable. I think he might have respect for it, but he wouldn't like it. I don't think there's a chance he would like it.
Okay.
I guess.
I mean, my opinion is somewhere in the middle on their two opinions, in the fact that I think he would be humbled by the fact that someone's willing to put that much money into something he created, but also disappointed in all the changes that were made to his work, like all his lore that he created for his country at that time, created all this lore, and they just take it and throw it away.
Well, so the things that I've kind of done a little bit of digging into, and these are things. For example, in the foreword to the second edition of Lord of the Rings, Tolkien actually states, one, this is not an allegory, because he was asked at one point,
I read that.
Was the Lord of the Rings an allegory for World War II?
Oh, yes.
And it's not. So he's not a big fan of allegory. Now, allegory is more symbolic of things than it is like a direct translation. So again, think of C.S. Lewis and Narnia. Aslan is a very clear allegory of Jesus. So I would have to relent and kind of agree. I don't know if Tolkien would be particularly thrilled with the project. That isn't to say that I think he would hate it, because of his other opinion on that he does talk about in. Did I forget to write that in my notes? I did forget to write that in my notes. So I'll have to get that and put that in our show notes. But Tolkien was a big believer in that the author should not be looked at as a reflection of his work. The work should stand on its own merits.
Right.
And he does talk about that in different letters and things of that nature, where he's responding to people who have asked him questions. We can definitely get into how something should look and how something should be, but you can find notes where Tolkien gives this whole big, huge explanation to this woman about, did Aragorn ever have a beard or not? And he very clearly says, no, he does not, and gets into this whole big theme of Numenor and its history and culture and all this other different stuff. But what did they do with Peter Jackson's movie? Beard the whole way through. So, there's something to be said there. But I'm gonna talk about this next. In the essay on fairy stories that Tolkien put out, he doesn't like it when we try to identify source material. So, for example, we're all big fans of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. How many of us have read Gilgamesh?
No. Cliff Note version.
Version. Salva?
No, I just watched documentaries on it.
Okay. I guess I'm the only one who liked Gilgamesh. Because at the end of Gilgamesh, there is a thief who has to sneak into a dragon's lair to steal a two-handed goblet to take it back. And the dragon is so enraged when the thief steals his goblet that he takes off and destroys the nearby town. Sounds pretty familiar, right? But again, while that is a parallel you can draw, Tolkien's The Hobbit and Smaug and the whole characterizations of Bilbo and Smaug themselves should be held at their own merits. Essentially, a storyteller or sub-creator, as Tolkien liked to say, is making soup. So the longer the soup simmers, the better it becomes. So the longer you take with the story and the more you put into the story, the better it comes out, is kind of my takeaway from that. So there's obviously always going to be some kind of reference. Like, how many of us have heard that, Gandalf is an allegory for Jesus?
I don't think so.
Well, he died. I see the point.
I see. Yeah, I kind of see what
Right.
you're getting at.
But he's not.
Yeah.
And Tolkien never intended for him to. How many of you have heard that he's an allegory for Odin?
Yeah, because the gray and
I've never heard that.
There's a
but-
lot of characteristics. Stormcrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characteristics. So Tolkien definitely took a lot of different things and blended them together to create Middle Earth and its story and its history. But there's no direct allegory with anything. So again, I think he would let the show stand on its own merits, but I don't think he would be very happy with the
with his name being put on
allegory of it being, sort of part of the Silmarillion.
Well,
So,
okay.
anyway, that's just my thoughts, my feelings again, and that's just I'm not trying to throw like his essays and stuff out. I am trying to use those to say like I mean I'm pulling from things that Tolkien said himself.
Yeah, right.
Is all that I'm using that. Again, in no way, shape, or form do I think any of us are right or wrong in any of our opinions, because who the heck knows, right?
We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So one, we haven't seen it yet, but two, Tolkien's not with us anymore. This is, good Lord, I don't even know when he passed. But yeah. So I mean, it's been definitely a very long time. So with all that being said, what does concern you guys with the show? And I'm gonna let each of you kind of get 1 point in edgewise, so that way not one person's getting to just kind of talk. So I'll start with Dylan. So Dylan, what's something? Everybody else, feel free to like speak. I mean, definitely let Dylan have his chance to talk, but feel free to kind of comment. But Dylan, go ahead.
I mean, the main thing is we've seen the picture of the Dwarf Queen, which I don't care. But the thing is the thing about it that bothers me the most is the lack of the beard on the Dwarf Queen. Because Tolkien himself had said that, yes, dwarves, both male and female, do have beards. So put a beard on her and I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't care. I just want that beard on her.
So I'm just going to chime in on this.
Yeah.
I know Gimli and Aragorn kind of make the joke in the movie. Do you know where? Because I've actually tried to look this up, and I could have swore I found an actual answer of yes, that whole conversation actually happens.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that it has been said by him, but you can't really find because when you look at like sources, it's just more of like this source leads you to this one, which tells you to go to this one. It's like, I just need a solid source.
I think it's in the Silmarillion, if I'm not mistaken, during
See,
the whole creation story.
I wanted to think that and again, this isn't something where I can go and tell anybody a page number to go look at, but I wanted to think when I did some research on that like a week or so ago, that it did reference the Silmarillion, and it literally says dwarven women are so much like the men that they even have beards or something along those lines. It wasn't necessarily in the context of like a joke, like it is in the movies.
Yeah,
in
Gimli says it.
how Gimli says it. It does definitely state in the appendix of Lord of the Rings that the women go out so little that people often do mistake them for the men, but never gets into facial hair or anything along
Yeah.
those lines.
I'd be okay if they didn't have beards.
I mean, that's my opinion. Because so again, this is strictly my opinion. If you're gonna have a female actor play a female part and then slap a beard on her, why did you hire a female to begin with?
Well, then again, you could say the same thing if you're gonna have a human actor play a dwarf part. Then
Fair counter argument. Fair counter argument. So it's kind of it's one of those things of like where do you draw the line?
Aragorn's beard. That's where you draw the line.
Yes,
They gave him a beard. Give the woman a beard. I'm just kidding.
make it happen. Make it happen. I have to shave my beard for my job, so I don't get to grow
That's
one.
lame.
It sucks. They claim it's under EPA restrictions.
EPA?
Or not EPA. What is it? I work in pest control. For anybody who doesn't know, which is probably everybody. But essentially, like the state and federal government says that I'm supposed to be clean shaven because at times I may be required to wear a respirator in order to perform a certain service. So in order to be able to wear proper PPE, I have to be clean shaven.
I'm gonna take BS for $300.
Yes.
But anyhow.
Yes. No. There's. Anyway. That's off topic. So Salva,
Yes.
dwarves and beards,
Yes.
beards and dwarves
Yes. Yes.
go hand in hand like pizza and beer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a longtime fan of Dungeons and Dragons as well, personally since the second edition of the game. And so I'm kind of accustomed to the idea of different nationality, like black elves or black dwarves or Asian halflings. Why not? Because in that context of multi-planes and different fantasy world, it all makes sense. Now, in Tolkien, on the other hand, I feel like the same amount of freedom is not really, shouldn't be allowed in a sense, because it doesn't really, like, Tolkien describes a lot of nationality in other parts of the world. I don't see why the need to include, in a sense of this inclusiveness, I don't know if that's even a word, to include everybody.
I mean, inclusiveness is an actual word.
Yes, great. So that.
But I see what I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, so in a way, I don't know. I mean, there are some Sudrons, a Haradrim, and others that could easily fit into all sorts of nationality from Middle Eastern, from blacks. So I don't see why the need to put, again, my fear, and you can take it as that, it's a fear, concern, is that they're using, whoever is behind these stories, they're using this to convey a certain ideology that is peculiar to this time, that has nothing to do with Tolkien. And they're using Tolkien because, granted, it's a money grab. I mean, people love Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Sort of a clickbait. This is my my fair and honest opinion.
No, I look, I can't say that I understand that concern because I just don't have that concern. But again, it's not anything that I fault you for. I know that you have no ill will towards any person, regardless of where they come from. And so to give you the opportunity to expand on that a little bit, like what about Tolkien's universe, the writings of Tolkien give you that concern?
Look, as I said, every time in history, in a way, needs to translate whatever Lord of the Rings of Gilgamesh into our own language. That language doesn't mean literally English. It means the way that we see, the way that we perceive. So I'm expecting a certain degree of adaptation. It's natural, it's understanding. Again, mine is more of a concern based not only on the little trailer, but based even on some of the feedbacks from the quote unquote famous YouTubers or super fans, as they call them. Based on the kind of people that they chose and their reaction and their commenting on the series, that's why I have some concerns.
Okay.
Because everything to me is leading to that kind of drawing. But again, in Italy we say everybody is innocent until it's proven guilty. So
I guess you stole that from us.
I don't know. Maybe.
No, I definitely joke on that. So John, do you have much of anything else to say on dwarves and beards and who's playing what?
Yeah.
Don't limit else.
And this goes for anything. So at the end of the day, it's a work of fiction. Okay. At the end of the day, it's media, so it's not quite as bad. Like if you were to go and make your own vision of something, regardless of the reason for it, even if it's just because you woke up on a Sunday and wanted to. I think this falls into a category of exception. The Lord of the Rings does, and this isn't just because I'm a big fan. I would be mad
You're a
with
super fan.
I would be mad with real world history if they were to go and change something. Like for instance, like a well documented person like Julius Caesar. Okay, if you were to go and change characteristics about him in something that's supposed to represent the source material at least a little bit, okay, I'd be kind of pissed. I'd be like, why?
Right.
Okay. Well, with other fantasy, I wouldn't be mad. I'd be like, oh, okay, this is just their adaptation. This is just this point in the series. This is this director's vision. But with The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien went through an incredible effort to preserve and detail and be extremely specific and world build. And like to the point that, I mean, come on, it's the granddaddy of modern fantasy, okay? Like, it's almost a piece of history in its own way for this medium. Okay, so I feel like it's really disrespectful to do anything but what Peter Jackson and crew tried to do. Okay, that's how I feel about it. To me, it just comes across as if, granted, I haven't seen it. Maybe they won't be disrespectful, but I understand what Salvo was saying.
Right,
that's his concern.
Right.
I think that because of outside factors that have nothing to do with wanting to represent Lord of the Rings, they might take it as an opportunity. Well, like Disney with Star Wars. I mean, come on, let's be real. Like.
Don't start me on that.
I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole because that's not what this is about. But like, that's what I'm afraid of.
I am. You know, this probably not a hot take for the room, but the sequel movies. Look, I'm sorry. Force Awakens had me so excited for what they were going to do next, and then I was let down in almost every way, shape, or form.
We all were.
That's just kind of like I said, Force Awakens I felt was good. It did a good job of kind of drawing us back into Star Wars universe. Yes, was it cliche to have the big giant Death Star-ish thing and they have to go fly down the tube to go blow it up? Yes. But come on, what is more iconic than that in Star Wars? So, yes, was it cheesy? Was it cliche? But I will say, when they shot that giant beam through hyperspace and blew up like 3 planets in one go, I was like, holy crap.
Okay, well, and this is relevant, I swear.
Yeah, no.
Episode 7 was still pretty true to the source material.
Right.
And the original spirit, like you were just saying, okay?
And then I do really feel like they did kind of get away from it.
Exactly.
So the thing, and this is something, I'm not even going to say that I have like some kind of big experience in like production. I've kind of had a window open in production. I've worked with an organization, a church that does a lot of production work for their Sundays, for the stuff, all the things. And it does kind of, things like, do you have a closed casting call or do you have an open casting call? So I don't know what these guys did. I don't know if they had an open casting call and they literally did just pick the best people for the role. That very well may be what they did. I'm not saying whether that is or is the case. I'm really not.
Well, and what is their, I guess to kind of, sorry to interject, but
no, go ahead.
It also depends on what their idea of the best person for the role is.
Exactly.
There's so many variables here.
Right. And so that is sort of the difference between an open casting call and a closed casting call. Because a closed casting call is, we are looking for Caucasian, long hair, blue eye guy.
Thanks
John?
for looking at me. Yeah.
Oops, you fit that category.
Such a stereotypical.
Versus we are looking for someone who is of Chinese descent, and we need somebody who looks Chinese because they are playing the part of a Chinese character in a show.
We have Dylan here.
Oh, dang. Okay, then.
Wow.
That was...
Wow. Salva. Anyway,
Just
So-
so I look like a fat samurai doesn't mean I am.
Wrong culture, but
Yeah, well, he said Chinese.
Dylan.
I'm not racist, I promise. I'm not racist.
I don't want to get off topic, but have you ever done one of those DNA things like Ancestry or?
Mine would be more Native American, I promise.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
You see it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think I'm technically like 1/16, but I don't claim. I didn't grow up in a tribe, so I grew up as a white boy in
I grew up in a tribe of white trash.
so did I, brother. So did I.
Okay.
All of us did besides him.
Now, to get back on track on Star Wars, relating to Lord of the Rings, after watching the number 7, I think number 8 probably. Basically, the Last Jedi, I think.
Last Jedi, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. I'm not very familiar to those titles because I watched them once, but I gotta say, when I go back and I look at Rogue One, it really hurts
Yes.
because
Yep.
it really hurts because it tells me that
yes.
if there is a will, like we can still make, I think, movies that still deliver a great story that make a good mix of CGI and old school puppets. So we can do it. With Rogue One, we did it. So the fact that we don't do it, I'm assuming that it's a choice.
So that is sort of a big thing. In the years after CG has kind of come around, it's a lot cheaper to do CG than it is to even do puppets at this point. Unfortunately, it really just honest to God is. Speaking of Star Wars and Disney has pretty much gone to it was actually a game company that started it. So basically, when they film, they are now in a studio room surrounded by screens.
Oh yes,
and they have used like Unreal Engine, I think is it. And so like when the actors are looking around, they can actually see the landscape that they're looking at.
Yes,
they can actually put in the big giant scary monster that they're having to deal with until it gets to have to be a physical thing.
Yes,
right. This allows for a much easier time for an actor to be able to interpret how they should be reacting. So, but you have a good point. Sadly, the crystal, the Dark Crystal, you brought that up. Netflix did a series for that. I thought it was great.
I thought it is great. Yes.
It tanked.
I know.
It was so sad because there was so much love put into that.
Yes.
Clearly because they did use puppetry and a lot of time and effort and money went into making those puppets. And it was really sad to see it fail. Oh crap, I got off topic.
We all did. It's okay. What the show's for.
Right. So to me,
what were we talking about again?
Well, initially we were talking about Dwarf Women and Beards. And that kind of opened up to
us talking about being white trash.
Woman, dwarf, beards, and lightsabers.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Women,
women, dwarves, beards, and lightsabers. That should be the episode.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be honest. Have I reread and read through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings? Yes. The Children of Hurin is one of my favorite books that Christopher did with the notes from his father. I have not read through the Silmarillion.
Yeah, I did it.
I have not. I got through about 3 chapters of it and was like, whew, I needed to take a break, and then I never ended up coming back around to it. So it is actually next on my Audible credit. Like it's the next book I'm getting because I now, especially with all the stuff that's kind of gone on in the controversy and whatnot, I kind of want to dive deeper into that.
It is my favorite. To me, it is my favorite Tolkien book, and originally was more of a compilation of different stories that have been put together later on. But
yeah,
I think it is the best because it spans for so many millennia and ages that it gives you such a broad understanding of the whole Middle Earth. It's not just Arda itself.
It's kind of a bird's eye view of everything, right? It doesn't get uberly specific, like
Well,
Lord of the
it
Rings.
tells
or,
stories, but it jumps from ages of
right, from age
ages,
to yeah. So it is kind of a bit of a snapshot from my understanding from what you're telling me. So I personally do see room for some alterations for some of these things that they are doing. I can only quote the and there's a lot of debate right now on how much of an expert this guy is, but like have you guys seen the interview with the like Tolkien expert? He's a professor in Washington College.
No.
So he's an older guy. He has a podcast. He's done it since he started in 2009. He deep dives Tolkien and the themes and everything. Like some of my notes even come from his podcast today.
Oh.
I would still recommend his podcast. Hot take, he's excited for the series. He did say at the end of his little interview, there are some things that do kind of worry him. They're like the whole guy in the crater. That's like the trailer. If you go back to the trailer, there's this guy, he like falls from the sky. There's this big, huge fiery crater. He's standing in the middle of it. He's like, okay, what's going on here? Like, what is this guy? Like, so he's not like 110% on board, but he's like 90% on board.
Well, I think everyone's excited to see it, but
for different
people,
reasons.
yeah.
Well, but so one of the things that he talks about is Tolkien does in some work. I've went back and through that interview to see if he actually mentions it. Again, this whole YouTube video that I watched is edited. Like it's not 100% of everything that this guy says. So I don't know for sure, but somewhere I guess he says in Tolkien's notes, letters, whatever, Tolkien does kind of, if you were to look at Numenor, it's actually closer to what would be our equator. If you look at Arnor, it's actually more like where the UK is in terms of longitude and latitude, in terms of its climate and its environment. I don't know how true that is. I have nothing to back that with what letter, what place he actually presented that from.
Isn't it the world that Lord of the Rings takes place on supposed to be more flat? So technically, wouldn't everybody be equidistant?
So again, having not read the Silmarillion, I can't say. And again, like I said, the guy presented
the same place
right. So the guy who presented that information in his YouTube interview, again, whoever edited that interview did not give the source of where that information comes from. So I have no way to say where it comes from. Like, again, a lot of the notes that I spoke about earlier about Tolkien's thoughts on like his own personal work, all of those, like that's from the appendix of the second edition of Lord of the Rings. That's from his essay on fairy stories. Mm-hmm. I can tell you those things and you can go find them yourself. This whole thing right now is not something that I feel like I can say, I know where to direct you. Mm-hmm. As the guys in the room with me and the people listening to this afterwards, you can go find this information in this place. So I'm only bringing it up because, again, this guy actually teaches courses on Tolkien.
What a joke.
Yeah, right.
What a
seriously. Again, the reason I say snapshots, a big controversy is the hobbits being in the Second Age. From my understanding, it does talk about how humans never really identified them until the Third Age. So there is sort of that window, to me, my opinion, there is sort of that window of their hobbits could have been around in the Second Age, but maybe they were always just dwarves. They weren't ever recognized as something separate.
Look, everything is pointing to the fact that what these people are doing is simply this. They're taking the topics that are popular and are known, such as the hobbits, the elves, the things that we all love, and they're simply reskinning them for somehow some sort of Silmarillion, and they're blending together to make something that it's palatable to all of us in our time. And there will be nothing wrong with it. I mean, Peter Jackson somehow made his own changes. That I remember when the movie came out, some people were concerned. Tom Bombadil, for example, was cut out. And I think in the end, it was a good choice overall. But I do understand. Some people said, oh, but that didn't happen. And now looking back, even me that I read the book a couple of times, Lord of the Rings, I have mixed feelings because I remember things based on the movies, not on the book.
Yeah.
Like a big diversion is, well, Frodo, basically he leaves the company. In reality, I mean, the whole situation happens differently. It's not a voluntary choice that he does.
Well, and to touch on that, Aragon is a caricature of human masculinity. Like, he is the epitome of man.
Mm-hmm.
He is righteous. He is.
Oh, yes.
He is the king. He is the healer. He is the hunter. He is the tracker. He is the epitome of man. But in the movies, he is lost. He's trying to actually kind of find himself. There is character development in taking on the responsibility of becoming a king that is vastly different from Tolkien's depiction of Aragon.
Theoden the same.
Yes.
He's a very pride and very, he's a good king in the book. In the movie, he's more, I understand. They wanted to take a different take on the characters. And as I said, I don't complain about the changes. Everybody, even when we tell story to each other, we add something every time. We kind of, so that doesn't concern me. But what concerns me is, again, I feel like where these changes are going is not to tell the story that Tolkien, those big, important topics about good and evil that makes the story epic, is actually, it's almost like an excuse to tell what some group of people in our time, they want us to know.
So, not to necessarily agree with the point that you're making, but to agree with you in terms of they are kind of creating their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, keep in mind, Amazon only has the like movie and film rights, so they don't have rights to the Silmarillion.
Are you serious?
So yeah, so my understanding of the situation is they do not have the rights to the Silmarillion.
Okay, well.
So in terms of them telling this story, it is more open. They have the appendix from the second edition and current editions of Lord of the Rings to go with, because there are things talked about, of the second age and the first age in the appendices. I could be wrong. That's something that we'll have to kind of put in the show notes after. I'll do some more research on that to see if they do actually have access to the Silmarillion. I see how you feel about that, and I just don't. Again, to me, it opens that door that they can.
So they can be too close to the real story. That's where it's
right.
saying.
Essentially, they cannot read the Silmarillion and literally take scenes from the Silmarillion and put it on screen.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
You know what? Still, though, I think everything I said still stands for me.
Yes. No, I don't think that this should change any of your all's opinion. Just that they cannot literally take anything written specifically from the Silmarillion.
Even so, perfect example. We've been talking about Peter Jackson a lot, and one thing that hasn't gotten brought up somehow. Yes, he took things out of the Lord of the Rings series or trilogy, like Tom Bombadil, changed Aragorn and Theoden around. Okay? That was okay with me because I know I kept harping, just true to the source material. I didn't say one for one copy.
Right.
And Tolkien wouldn't agree with that either.
Right. He's not for allegories.
But the whole story itself didn't get lost on me.
No.
Okay?
Right.
Now, on the inverse of that, another movie trilogy made by Peter Jackson, The Hobbit. On the inverse of that,
yes,
I watched the first one. This was one of the last movies I ever watched with my dad. Okay? I looked at him, and I said some really bad words about that movie and never watched the other two. I didn't even need to watch. Of course, I eventually went back and looked at the cliff notes for the other two. But, I didn't even need to watch the other two because I watched the first one and was like, what the was that? Okay? So my point being, because in the changes that were made in that, the whole idea, the whole feeling, emotion that you get from the story in the book was just not there. They just took so much of it to the point that it wasn't even what it was. Tom Bombadil not being there doesn't change the Lord of the Rings, okay? You know what I mean? Theoden being a little different doesn't change the conflict that's going on, the characters that are involved even. Even Theoden, to an extent, can be different than how he's portrayed in the books, and his part in the story doesn't get lost on you. But the whole thing they did with The Hobbit was what I'm worried about with this Amazon series, because they went for Hollywood, which diminished what The Hobbit was, which is a kid's story. It was a kid's story.
Now, on that, I definitely 100% agree with you. It was a kid's story. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit when his children were children.
Yes.
One of the first episodes of the professor at Washington, I just finished his second episode, which is really the first chapter of The Hobbit, and he talks about how much of a children's story it is. And so again, you have a very strong point of you're taking what is a story written for children and trying to adapt it into a big budget movie series and kind of age it up, which I think is ironic, because I really feel like, going back to Star Wars, the sequels did the opposite. It's like they took things and themes and characters from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogies and tried to age it down.
Yes.
And it just, to me, it definitely did not hit home. So before we get too far into everything, so I'm going to put you guys in the producer seat, because I take that back, because this is going to lead up to putting you guys in the producer's chair. Okay. The thing that I kind of realized with this TV series, Salva, John, and this even goes to me and the entirety of the Tolkien fandom, whether we all like it or not, we are not the target audience for this TV series.
Yep.
We aren't. There are thousands of us, maybe even tens of thousands of us.
Comic sections, there's hundreds of thousands.
Maybe millions, but that's still not a lot in the grand scheme of things.
But there are hundreds of thousands to millions of people who aren't.
On the cash cow, baby.
Yes.
So am I excited for this series? Yes. Do I mind a lot of these changes and things? No. Do I 110% recognize it for what it is? Yes. This is a money grab. It is an attempt to be able to take this and, to their ability, tell the story they want to tell, but at the same time, at the end of the day, Jeff Bezos has a lot of freaking money.
Well, something
and he wants
something
to throw
about
it at
the
things.
trailer that was, you watch the trailer and you're like, what is this, a new season of Game of Thrones? Like, it doesn't even look like Lord of the Rings. It looks more like Game of Thrones or some new fantasy world.
But guess what was commercially palatable and successful?
Exactly. Well,
Game of
yeah.
Thrones.
Yeah, I know it's all about the money.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there is something to be said. Like HBO threw a ton of money into that.
Yeah.
And it was very successful until one
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, I mean, it was successful, but it was awful.
The last season was just.
It was awful,
Anyway.
but that doesn't mean it didn't.
Can you
make
tell
money.
we all have strong opinions? So, in light of that, I'm going to start with Salva.
Mhm.
If you could create, if you had access to every word that Tolkien had ever written, and could make a series about the Second Age of
Yes.
Middle Earth, how do you think you would? Well, actually, I'm not even going to shoehorn you into the Second Age. If you wanted to tell a story within Tolkien's universe and you had full blessings to do so, what kind of story do you think you would want to tell?
That's such a big question. I'm not such a deep, I don't have such a deep knowledge of Tolkien, but definitely the biggest obstacle that I will face is this, and it is the money. Do I want to say something, putting a lot of money, knowing that what I want to say is not going to be embraced by the masses? Or do I follow the majority and go along with what the mainstream wants me to say? This is the problem. So I think Peter Jackson, when he did the first trilogy, made a sort of a jump in the dark, because it's easy now to say, oh, but that was obviously a success. Well, at that time, it wasn't obviously a success, because the fantasies back then were, at the best, maybe Willow, I mean,
Yeah.
Dragon Hearts, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
really
like
bad.
fantasy movies
Yes.
that were coming out at the time. Yeah, there weren't any really good
Yes.
ones.
So investing all that money, and not just the money, mobilitating hundreds of people, I mean, in the cast, creating things from scratch as in New Zealand, probably was more of an act of faith than anything else. So what am I saying? What would I do? I would probably follow his lead and act by faith. I believe the main thing that Tolkien speaks about, they go beyond time, and they're kind of everlasting, like Gilgamesh. The basic ideas of the inner discovering, to looking for who we are, those are things that I would say will never fade as long as there will be humans on Earth. So I would probably say I will be ready to lose the money, especially if they're not mine, and to make it. But I do see the limitations coming from, yes, it's all cool and nice, but in the end, as you said, we're not the target. So I would say this: I will focus on those few big important questions that I believe Tolkien's elaborate upon, such as the fight, the clash between good and evil, and but not just the good and evil, like the absolute good and absolute evil, and then elaborate on that.
Okay. John, if you were in the director's chair, if you were the producer, if you were the one writing this next adventure of Middle Earth, what would you make?
Did I already sign the contract? No, I'm serious. Because I'd get fired. No, I'm serious.
No. Just literally, if you could create it, you had all the green lights.
If I had all the, well, I'm going to say this. I don't think I'd ever be able to get all the green lights in the industry. I think the industry has more of a profound effect on all of this than the people making it.
Okay.
Because I'm with Savo. I would take the same approach that he talked about. The leap of faith thing, to follow my vision, to follow.
Okay.
The thing is, that's not profitable. Straight up. It can be. It has been. There's a few directors and producers that really do somehow find a way, like Quentin Tarantino is one of them. You know, he offends a lot of people, but he also makes a lot of money for people. You know, he picks a cast. Well, they're famous now, but when he made Pulp Fiction, like a lot of, John Travolta was famous, but like for that role, you know what I mean? Like, Samuel Jackson at that time, you know what I mean? Like,
I would say Samuel L. Jackson would still make Pulp Fiction.
Well, yes. Yeah, no, but I mean, like, back then, it's like Sal was saying, it wasn't, now you look back at it, it's, film, it's history. But,
Yes.
But at that time, no. And for me, even with like our little YouTube channel, like, there's certain things that we have gotten in conflicts about because I just refuse to bend. Like, I see something almost in a moral space of like, what is the right thing and the wrong thing to do, and I just will not compromise. So I wouldn't even get the job because of that reason. So I guess if I did make a product, it would probably be a commercial failure, I guess is what I'm saying. Well, okay,
I'm not. I want you guys to understand. I'm not even trying to get into whether or not it would be successful.
Well,
but just like if you had your chance to put your stamp on like what you would want to do for any story, and I'm not saying it has to be some big grandeur like the story of the Lord of the Rings, but even just creating a character in the Second Age and just what little adventures that particular individual get into. Would you do something like that? Do you think you could do something like that?
I think I could write a nice little story about an elf and a dwarf friend. One has a bow and one has an axe. No, but seriously though.
What kind of movie are you making over there, John?
I don't know. It's hard to top the Hobbit story. It's pretty genuine. I would definitely make like a follow-up, like Samwise Gamgee becomes like some badass superhero archetype. I mean, he kind of is in the movie, but like he goes further than that. Like he becomes like the knight of the Shire and like goes on quests or something.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like that'd be kind of fun. That'd play on nostalgia too.
Well, just thinking about it, putting a spin on it. I mean, I could totally see like because Samwise does marry Rose.
Rosie,
is it just Rose?
Rosie Cotton.
Yeah, Rosie Cotton. Thank you. And they have children. They have quite a few children. I could totally see Sam raising his kids on the story of Frodo and him taking the ring to Mount Doom.
Well, that's what happened with Frodo.
And so like I could totally see Sam's like, especially since I have a 2-year-old boy who climbs and jumps and tries to, like, my dogs will roughhouse because they're dogs. He tries to get into the middle of it because he wants to roughhouse with the dogs. Like, and we have to be like, no, they will bite you and hurt you. I could totally see Gabriel like throwing a bucket on his head and finding a stick out in the yard and grab the trash can lid and go pretend to be Frodo and Sam, again, being Sam, telling the story to his son.
Yeah. Actually, cool. You guys gave me a great idea. Here we go. I'm going to drop it very quickly. You won't regret it. The movie would be the story of the son of King Elessar. So, Aragorn, as a king. His son, after the death of his father, he slowly becomes evil.
Okay.
And brings the whole thing of darkness back again into Gondor.
So instead of being the archetype of manhood.
Well, because very often, you know, when you guys say that soft times make a weak man and so forth.
Right.
So he's born in a time where everything has been defeated. The orcs are becoming more legends. And so it's easy for him to become probably used to everything have been given for granted. Less,
more of the setting of where he grew up. He would have grown up in more leisure than anything else.
Yes.
Palpatine.
Right.
Wow.
His name is
go
Prince
back
Palpatine.
to the Star Wars.
His name is Prince Palpatine.
Everything goes back to Star Wars.
Everything.
So, Dylan, if you could create your own story in Middle Earth, what do you think you would do?
Well, I know you said not to get into the if it would even make it, but I'd rather have a colossal failure than to fail the fan base, the true fan base, not appease to the, you know,
the masses.
Yeah, appease to the masses by putting in mild political jabs and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to get modern day politics involved in a story that is meant to take place in that age. I would want to create a story that I would maybe even go as far as to, you know, like cover some people from like, you know, like the Easterlings and stuff like that.
Okay.
Just because they're not as, you know, fleshed out in the like story, not you know what I'm trying to say. Right. Yeah. They're not as fully fleshed out.
So, Mikey, I think you can expand on that. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry, guys, for running late. I got some medical issues in the extended family. Well, if your wife's not extended, it's immediate family.
Okay.
So
first off, I have to say, before I let you get started, I'm getting real thirsty for them sideburns.
Okay, you liking the sideburns?
Yeah.
First time in 10 years. Okay, again, I know that I'm always odd. I cannot stand.
Are you going to talk about the razor?
I cannot stand where people have multiple blade razors. How the hell can I shave sideburns in a straight line if I can't see what I'm doing because the head of your razor is 4 inches thick, right? I had to order my special razors that I used for years. They're called, I'm not going to give them the name. It's a company that makes pencils and pens as well, or pens. And these guys are just like, it's a very simple one blade razor, and it's amazing.
Yes.
So expanding upon what I would like to tell in Middle Earth. Obviously, if you watch our videos, you see us play. I play a lot of the Serpent Horde, and I find it. I wish that they would have told a story about maybe take us down to, you know, the southern lands, and you're telling the story of maybe it's an origin story of sorts. You get to see, because, you know, the fall of the Herodrum wasn't something very quick and easy. There was some rebellions, and there were the good Harad fighting to keep the black Numenorians from corrupting them. So I think you follow a band of guys almost like a Robin Hood. You get a guy, he's essentially there, almost like an Aladdin type. He's kind of a lovable scamp, right? He's got a group of guys with him. You throw some women in there because I don't know how Harad worked. They were all covered up. You don't know who's who, you know? And they're running around and they're basically causing trouble for the black Numenorians and Sauron and all the evil guys that are trying to overthrow, you know, to try to take over. And maybe you even throw a half troll in there, almost like a Chewbacca type. You got a big level, because, you know, we don't know anything about them either.
Right.
You don't even see them in the movies as it is. Throw us a big lovable half troll in there that, you know, is almost like a Mr. T type that's just real big and strong and scared of everything, right?
Does he have to have the
Now listen, but then all of a sudden, you know, right at the end of the season, when this guy is about to overthrow, he walks into this massive throne room and he sees like a Nazgul there with a Palantir. And all of his guys in his party, his merry band of men and his half-troll, if you will, they stop and they wait for him to make his move. And he drops his sword, turns around, and you can see that they've lost him. And then you can fade to black and come back, and that lovable scamp you've been following this entire story was Suladan, the Serpent Lord. And it's his origin story, but you didn't know it. You thought you were following a good guy. And to me, that's a 5-minute idea that I come up with that I would love to see.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a way to expand upon the universe.
We were actually on the phone kind of discussing like how things could be different that would make more sense to having different ethnicities represented in the show. And one of the things that we talked about was, so frequently in past movies, do you have the people of ethnicity are the bad guys, especially like people who are Arabic in culture and everything else, Russians, Chinese,
That's okay.
Censored.
Yeah.
So
Redacted.
okay, redacted, whatever. But again, they are represented as like bad guys a lot, especially in old like 90s and 80s action flicks.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so
But nowadays,
so
it's
one
more
of the things that
flipped.
we talked about was like, okay, how can we make this to where it's a much more dynamic story? And it is, you have like good Haradrim who are fighting against bad Haradrim, because then you have the dynamic of they're all just people.
And
So
now maybe you go back and you watch Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and you see the Haradrim.
yeah,
And you wonder, are any of those, were they part of his band that failed? You know?
Yeah. So for me, for me to have a chance to answer this question, I think oddly enough, this is where I would get into the territory of I actually know that Tolkien would not like where I would go, because it's the very place that he didn't want to go. It's the story he started to write as a sequel to The Lord of the Rings. Essentially, it takes place during the era where Aragorn has died and his son has taken over. But there are these rebellions coming up from men. Some of them have kind of delved back into the dark magics of Sauron, and so it essentially becomes or alludes that it is the two blue wizards that had been corrupted by Sauron that ultimately who helped lead the Haradrim and the Easterlings to fall to Sauron.
You see that?
Are the ones who come back, and now they are the two bad guys. They're the evil that has to be taken care of. And the reason that I say that Tolkien did not like this, and it's in notes on, if I'm remembering correctly, it is a part of the appendix of the Children of Húrin. I could be wrong. It's been a little while since I've read it. But essentially, Tolkien never wanted to dive into humanity in and of itself. Actual humanity is corruptible, is evil, but is also good. And so he wanted to tell that story, Salva, as you put it, of good, true good versus true evil. But when you start taking that universe in which he has presented a true evil and a true good, and then have to kind of put it in the middle, he didn't like the idea of doing that because we already have that in the real world. But to me, I feel like that makes a great story.
I'm on your side. I think he was being a little bit of a geezer.
But to be fair, though, it goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, in that Tolkien really did have a love for old things.
He was a traditionalist. I mean,
So,
those are the exact words. John used.
Traditionalist, or I mean, maybe that is a good word for it, a way to kind of categorize it. But I don't think it wasn't that he didn't value new things, but I think he didn't put nearly as much value in new things simply because it was new.
I don't remember, I think it was his own writing. It may have even been in the appendixes in the Lord of the Rings, the new editions they put out.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on this like monologue about how you miss it. Where did I read that? I was reading somewhere that he just hated what industry had done to his home in England because it was such a picture. It was the Shire to him was his home growing up, literally. But when he came back from World War One, industry had changed everything so much that like you didn't have the windmills in the background and the farms and the So yes, that was just to support your point.
Yeah. So anyway, since Mikey is just kind of coming in for us, I'm going to kind of backtrack us a little bit.
Oh yeah, everybody wants to hear his opinion on it.
Mikey, I know the big topic that you've not gotten to talk about today is action. I'm calling her Action
The
Galadriel.
War Queen.
Okay. So, and now listen, there's a famous country singer in this parts that has a song where he refers to himself as a dinosaur. And in this case, I do feel this way. Women are powerful in their own rights. Okay. And I find it offensive that they felt like Galadriel needed armor and a sword to be a badass, because she's a badass already. She's the most powerful elf in Middle Earth, and she doesn't need armor and a sword to be that way. And it just bothers me and I could care less about the way she looks. Out of all the rings of power, hers has the ability to stop time. Like she doesn't heal with it. She doesn't have fire, right? She literally just does not let people die. Trees don't die. She kept Lothlorien alive for I don't know how long. And that was her reign. She's the most powerful wizard in Middle Earth, and she had been for thousands of years. And there's no need for her to have a sword and an armor. Like she's powerful in her own right. And that just, like I said, I find it offensive that you have to take her out of her position of power already and dumb her down to the unwashed masses. Hey, girl, sword, armor, Joan of Arc. Like she's not Joan of Arc. She's her own type. She's more of a queen type, and that's where she should be in my mind. But otherwise, that's all I've got to say. I think you're making her less powerful by turning her into a regular soldier.
Saying she has to rely on a sword to beat people.
Well, and like we discussed once before, my hope is that they're using this as a means to show her grow into that. Because one of the it's one of the newest books that the Tolkien estate has put out in the longest time. It does have references to Tolkien's notes that elves do have a life cycle. They do age. They are born and they age, but they age and grow at a different ratio than men do. So again, I haven't picked up the book. I haven't read the book, but I do know that is referenced in that book. So I know like some people are kind of comparing her to like a 20-year-old in the trailer that we're seeing, whereas versus where we find her in Peter Jackson's movies as a 55, 60-year-old. So someone who has become more wise over time. So I don't know. I really do feel like, Mikey, you have a really strong point on a woman doesn't have to have a sword, an armor, and a shield to be a badass. I also think that they can.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that's not necessarily the point that you're making.
Eowyn was a badass.
Right.
But she was a total different type of badass than Galadriel is.
Right.
Okay, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, and she's not Aylmer.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to be Aylmer. Aylmer's a mere man. Eowyn was a mere woman. Galadriel is not a mere woman, and she doesn't need a sword and armor to be that tough.
Yeah. No, I got you, and I'm not dismissing your argument. I think you actually have a pretty strong argument of that she didn't necessarily have to have those things. So
Right. It's like the old adage says, the post is mightier than the sword. Okay, I'm done.
Well, it's the elf con too, so it's better.
That exquisite elf. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening to our armchair opinions. I don't say that as being mocking to anybody in the room or anyone who's listening. No, this is a thing where like I do kind of become an armchair coach, writer, producer, whatever, because I do think about these things because I am actually trying to write my own book. So Anyway,
Shameless plug.
I don't know about that.
That book's gonna get ratioed.
Dylan will make sure that your book gets ratioed.
All right, but anyway, guys, no matter what stories you try to tell and fail, just don't roll.
Getting dicey.